gave a reason to sort out this particular suspect from all of the other vehicles that they were potentially looking at, and combined with the other circumstances that they were able to show, the path of travel, the fact that they had located the vehicle that came and went from WSU in the general time frames of the murders, the night of the murders, those things gave them that particularized suspicion that they needed to be able to say, look, taking all of these circumstances into account, there's a pretty good chance that this is who we're looking for.
It's always good when professional people verify things that I am thinking, because even though I'm not a lawyer, I kind of feel like I've got a bit of a grasp on the situation. And I have studied some law, commercial law, at university, as well as international law, albeit they are so completely different subjects. Nonetheless, I'm going to dedicate this video to verification of things that I have said in the last couple of videos. So first I'm going to turn to Andrea Burkhart, who is an experienced trial and appellate litigator. She has a Twitter and YouTube account, and so we'll look at her Twitter account, and specifically because I could have just posted links for you all to go read it, but maybe you all don't have Twitter, or maybe pissed off with Elon Musk, so you cancelled your Twitter account, whatever. I've got the screenshots here, and we'll just go through what she said and how that relates to what I said. Andrea was replying to a post about the cell phone ping, where it says, a cell phone ping is the act of determining the estimated current location of a cell phone. This may be accomplished by GPS data or using cell tower triangulation. This has come into question in a number of different cases, but Andrea Burkhart breaks it down, and there's a reason that I'm going to read through this thread, because first of all, this is a lawyer telling us what the case is. But also, I'm going to repeat something I said in my last video. So Andrea says, let's take a look at how the defense might handle the pings. The idea of a ping is that you can identify a person's location by tracking which cell phone towers their phone connects to. By following the connections, you can identify a subject's location. A weakness of pings is that it assumes the phone connects to the closest tower. As the phone moves, it will connect to different towers, showing the path of movement. But proximity to a tower is not the determinative factor in establishing which tower connects to a phone. Factors including signal strength, tower height, elevation, wattage of output, range of coverage, angle of coverage, presence of obstructions, call traffic, and other variables can affect cell tower connectivity. For this reason, some courts have declined to allow some kinds of reconstruction testimony that purports to establish a defendant's whereabouts based on his phone's pings, finding it unreliable. See US versus Evans, a granularization theory. Idaho requires expert testimony to be based on facts or data that experts in the particular field would reasonably rely on. The state will have the burden to show that their data and methodology are reliable and accepted by experts in the field. The most reliable method for using historical pings to determine location is triangulation. This method relies on multiple towers receiving the cell signal, and the data can then be used to calculate the phone's location. Triangulation is feasible in urban environments that have very dense cell tower placement and lots of overlapping coverage. This is much less common in rural areas like Moscow, where a single tower may provide exclusive coverage for many square miles. This also applies to where I live as well, by the way. Like many legal issues, the devil is often in the details when it comes to the strength and admissibility of the evidence. The arrest affidavit gives us a few details of the data and methodology relied on by the FBI's cast agent. I am 100% sure defense will be looking into them. She says if you're interested in reading about this issue, check out this article from Richmond Journal of Law and Technology on this subject. Someone else says, I would think having the pings or GPS data along with images of his car on cameras near the pings should help to establish how accurate the pings are. Andrea says it definitely helps corroborate that particular ping, but not all of the pings generally, because the circumstances affecting tower connectivity can change between pings, and other pings could have insufficient connections to do a triangulation analysis. Somebody else says his car was caught on camera multiple times in the area though. Wouldn't this be more important evidence than the pings? Andrea says, personally, yes, I think the video is better evidence of his specific whereabouts than the pings are likely to be. The pings are mainly helpful for corroborating the video and establish the connection between the car on the video and BK's phone. Ding dong, that's exactly what I was thinking. And if the prosecution is smart, that's exactly what they will do. Someone asked, is subpoenaing the GPS data done? If BK opted in to uploading location data, Google or Apple may have his location to within 15 feet. Yes, if they can get GPS data, that will be a game changer. If they have his phone, they should be able to extract the GPS data. If they don't, I assume they already tried to get it from AT&T, so they don't have to look to the cloud. So as we know, in the Suzanne Morphew case, they actually did have to look to the cloud to get that GPS data. Tank says, super interesting, and this is one of my areas of expertise, so it's cool to see it applied to the legal sense. While cell tower roaming is indeed multivariable, there is an upper bound to the range. It makes a larger error margin, but it's still pretty accurate depending on use. So essentially, what Andrea has done here is verified that my assumption of the cell phone data being evidence in and of itself by itself is not necessarily the case, and that the phone pings matched with CCTV footage timestamps are corroborating evidence of other facts, i.e. where the vehicle actually was, is a true and correct accounting of the facts. Phew. It's always good to learn that you're actually right and not leading your audience up the garden path. So thank you, Andrea Burkhart, for confirming these particular details for us.
For me, the most shocking piece of new information that we got from the probable cause affidavit was that DM, one of the roommates, had actually seen the killer in the home on the night of the murder. This is shocking in part because it's really too horrifying to contemplate, but also because I don't think it's been fully appreciated how critical this was to blowing open the case. So I wanted to make this video to talk about why DM is the hero of this case. So the probable cause affidavit tells us that DM originally went to sleep in her bedroom. She is in the southeast side of the second floor. She was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what sounded like Gonsalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Gonsalves and Mogan had bedrooms up on the third floor. A short time later, she said she heard who she thought was Gonsalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." Based on their review, police think it's possible that it may have been Kernodle that she heard and not Gonsalves. DM said she looked out of her bedroom but didn't see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. A second time, she opened the door because she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. And she then heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She then opened her door for the third time after she heard this crying, and she saw a figure in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past her as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. So, pretty harrowing thing for a young girl. I believe she was a freshman at University of Idaho at this time to have to go through. And just given the circumstances of how all of this unfolded, we have a lot of reason to think that this was an extremely shocking, very traumatic event for her. I know that there has been a lot of tendency on social media to speculate about why she didn't immediately call the police, why it, was not until 11 a.m. the following morning that the 911 call was made. To me, this is not particularly surprising for a number of reasons. I don't really intend to get into a lot of that here, but suffice it to say, yes, the defense is going to be asking about that, but I don't think this is going to be something that there will really be a big opportunity to make a lot of hay out of, because there are plenty of reasonable explanations for why a person experiencing an extremely stressful event like this would respond in the way that she did. So the important thing that the police got from DM in this interview was the physical description of the man in the home. And this was key. This was the linchpin, in my view, to breaking this case open. So without DM's identification, there is no reasonable suspicion here. There is nobody in particular to target. And without that, there's no search warrant. Without the search warrant for the CSLI, there's no case. We don't know who we're targeting. Now, it's possible that police are gonna come across a suspect at some point, but it's also very possible that he might kill again before they have the evidence that they need to be able to put all of the pieces together. And so I don't think it's too much to say that while Mr. Kohberger is 100% entitled to his presumption of innocence, and while we have just a very small part of the picture at this point in time, there is a lot of this case still to come. If he is the person who did it, her identification may have saved a lot of lives. They may have saved people from having to go through the type of horror that I have to anticipate that she is probably going through at this point in time. So I thought it was really important to say this, because I think it's a virtual certainty that, having experienced this, she is dealing with a lot of trauma. She is very likely dealing with survivor's guilt. She is very likely dealing with self-doubt, questioning just what could she have done differently types of questions. She's going to be reliving this night, unfortunately, probably for the rest of her life. And so I think it's really important to be able to, whenever we can, and even in the darkest circumstances like this, to be able to look at the silver lining in all of this horror. And the silver lining is that everything that she has had to go through, everything that she is going to suffer, that may have saved people. And it certainly is the reason why we have a criminal charge, a criminal process that's been initiated in the court that can now play itself out. So for that reason, DM is a hero in my eyes, and I really hope that you will join me in seeing her and treating her in that fashion.
Hear, hear. She is indeed a hero in this story. In my travels, I also found another expert who is able to verify something else that I assumed in relation to the vehicle and the traffic stops. This clip comes from the channel Surviving the Survivor.
Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffendorfer, who's a friend of the show and previous guest, was quoted in Newsweek as saying that she believes that there's a quote-unquote treasure trove of DNA evidence that's going to be found at Kohberger's apartment and in the vehicle he was driving. Do you agree with that assessment? We'll get into the details a little later, but do you agree with that off the cuff?
I mean, certainly you'd think that it would be a bloody scene and he would have blood all over him. So he either cleaned up, was covered in something, and then took that off, maybe put it in a bag. But I mean, initially at the crime scene, as he left, he certainly would have had ample blood on him. But I'm not sure how his car was. I mean, he might have had a place where he could have disrobed, had a covering, and got very little to, if he was careful, he could get little blood in there. But there certainly is the potential for there to be a lot if he hadn't prepared in advance to disrobe and clean himself off.
What do you suppose the chances of that are going to be? I'd be very surprised after the amount of time and visits and stalking that he put towards planning this attack if he didn't have a disrobing plan after the murders. The question is, where did he disrobe?
She went on to say, I think the treasure trove is in that apartment, meaning in Pullman, Washington, and in the car. She says, in my experience, you just really can't hide blood evidence. It sinks in. Just imagine the upholstery of your car, the gas pedal. I know he was probably gloved. We know he was covered in all black in terms of his face and all, but he would have been bloody. Do you necessarily agree with that, or is there any way he came out of there unscathed?
You know what, he even if he came out of there unscathed, he's going to have a lot of their blood on him. They wouldn't be looking for his blood in his car so much as their blood. So if he didn't disrobe and find some way of cleaning, there's an enormous amount of blood in that car. And some of that, like she says, you can't clean. On something like upholstery, particularly if it's black, if you don't have a particular kind of light, it's really hard to find. The other thing is, even if you find it, how are you going to clean it? You can't use bleach on your fabric. And so some of those rubber things like the pedals, I mean, there are just a lot of places, like she mentioned, the pedals and other things that people don't ordinarily clean. You know, you wouldn't think to get in between the little nooks and the crannies, you'd clean it well so that you don't see it. But that's a lot different than cleaning it so that the forensic people don't see it, because it gets in the nooks and the crannies. Places you can't clean, places you can't clean with bleach. So there is definitely the opportunity there for there to be a large treasure trove of blood items in his house, any place that he walked. Even if he cleans that, unless he cleaned that all real well with bleach, they'll still be able to collect DNA from that. And so there's just almost no way he could have cleaned all those things up that well if he got into that car bloody. He's in big trouble. They're going to find it.
Looking back at the affidavit, we can definitely see there's a possibility he had blood on the bottoms of his shoes. They say they used a presumptive blood test and then amino black, which is a protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. So he definitely had blood on the bottom of his shoes. He could have transferred that blood to the pedals of his car, and rubber is much harder to clean than any other surface.
As Brian Kohberger allegedly returned to the house at least 12 times leading up to these quadruple murders, it doesn't say he went into the house at any point. He was there 12 times. From a strictly scientific and forensic standpoint, does that help the case in any way, at least with digital forensics?
Yeah, I mean, the digital footprint is really important here. Right now, all we know is that we have the DNA of his or that's consistent with him on a knife. But, that's not enough. I mean, somebody could borrow your knife and leave the sheath there and it might have, your DNA on it. So having a sheath isn't enough. Now, there might be other evidence there. It's common when somebody is doing stabbing someone that their hand will slide down and cut themselves. So there might be other evidence of his there. There might be other DNA and some other things. But right now, all we know is there's DNA on that sheath. And other than that, they need other things like the digital footprint, where he's been, the fact that he was close. They need all of these other police work to come together to go with that DNA. Right now, the DNA, like you said at the beginning, he's innocent until proven guilty. And the DNA on a knife sheath doesn't make you a murderer all by itself. But some of those other things, he was there in the area, And then, of course, the cleaning out of his car and all of those other actions that he took. Those things are all very important in tying him to the crime and, the things that he did that make him look guilty besides his DNA being at the crime scene.
I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to think that one of his return visits to the crime scene the next day was because he lost the sheath. I'm pretty sure he knows as well as we do that that was probably his dumbest move, among many. And if it's his dad's knife, then I can imagine him being pretty panicked about the whole thing because his father might be falsely implicated by his dumb move.
Yeah, well, back to that point, Dr. Miller, they say he cleaned, and I quote, every inch of that car, but there's cleaning and then there's cleaning so people like you can't find evidence. How difficult is it to clean so the scientists and the people processing the crime scene would find nothing? Very difficult, as you just asserted, I imagine.
Yeah, if he got into that car bloody, he will not have cleaned it well enough. I would be shocked unless he actually, went and steam cleaned the upholstery and the whole inside of the car. It's almost impossible to find all the little places where you can get blood, whether it's on the finger, on the steering wheel, or in the little nooks and crannies. It's really the nooks and crannies. It's easy to clean the steering wheel. It's easy to clean up these places, but to be able to find them, you can use, certain kinds of lights and chemicals, and you can find where the blood is, and he can't do that. He doesn't have that and go, okay, where's the blood? Okay, I'll clean up that area. The other thing is you can't clean your upholstery and that stuff with bleach. Some of that soaks, into the fabric, but then down into the rubber cushion. Mm-hmm. So if blood gets into that, you didn't clean that out, unless, of course, you steam cleaned the entire thing. So even meticulously doing it with a toothbrush isn't going to get inside the upholstery. It's not going to get inside anything that it can soak into, and you're not going to find it in all the places where you're possibly going to have touched.
So there you go. It's always nice to know that my statistical, mathematical, sciencey background doesn't lead me too far astray when it comes to speculating what might be the case. And I have far less knowledge or experience when it comes to law, so it's also nice to know that I'm not too far astray with that as well. I guess the thing to note here is how I went about verifying what I was thinking. And it has far less to do with confirmation bias and more to do with finding professional people with the right expertise to verify what I was thinking, as opposed to, going to my favourite YouTuber like Bluehorn Betty to find out if her bias matches mine. Anyway, that's 2 more channels that you can go and follow. Andrea Burkhart from Burkhart Law and Surviving the Survivor. They are actually having some very, very good discussions about psychology and all manner of things related to the case, while at the same time remaining respectful towards the victims and the course of justice. Also, hang around for the next episode.